Have you ever read a comic or manga that you just fell in love with? You fell in love with the art. You fell in love with the characters, the world, the story, everything about it. And then when you look at your own art, your own comic, you felt like you weren't good enough? Hey, I'm Chris. Welcome to Panels in Progress, a channel about comics and manga and learning through the process. Today I want to talk about comparison, how it sneaks up on us and tries to stop us from telling our stories. Alright, so we've all done this, we've all experienced it. We are constantly connected via Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, ArtStation. There's 1,000 social media websites out there, and we can't help but see an amazing artist or amazing story or read an amazing manga and find ourselves looking at that work and comparing it to what we have or what we're currently doing. And this can be triggering for a lot of us because we all want to be that amazing artist. We all want to have our work loved and shared around the world. We want people to be amazed at the panels that we create or the story that we're telling. We want people to feel emotions when they read our story. But what we don't think about while we're scrolling through these websites or these apps is that what we're seeing is the finished product. Every manga, every comic, hell, even if you're on Webtoon scrolling, especially if you're scrolling through the Webtoon originals section, these are finished works. A lot of the artwork that we're seeing posted is a finished piece. We rarely see the sketches anymore. We rarely see those rough drawings. What we're seeing is the finished work, and we compare our unfinished work, our rough, messy drawings, to that finished work. But we don't see behind the scenes of these artists. Yeah, there's a new revolution of artists sharing their process, but for the most part, you're not seeing the discarded drawings, the thrown away manuscripts, you're not seeing the storyboard section, you're not seeing the disaster that a page was before they completely threw it away and started again. We have no idea how many times they hit Control Z or the undo button on that digital work. No idea. But that's the problem with comparison. Because we're comparing finished work to messy work, we're too close to our own work. We're too close to our own details. We are looking at our artwork, our panels, our pages every day, multiple times a day if we're allowed or able to. And when you look at your work every single day, sometimes it's hard to see that changes are happening, that growth is happening, that you are growing as an artist because you're too close to it. It's kind of like when you're on a weight loss journey. Those first couple weeks, yeah, you're hitting your calorie goals, you're hitting the gym, but you don't see the changes. Why? Because you look at yourself in the mirror every single day, and it doesn't happen overnight. And maybe that's one thing we need to remember is that artist, it didn't happen overnight. How great they are, how amazing their artwork is, how amazing their storytelling ability is, it didn't happen overnight. But yet, we still compare our day one to someone's day 1000. I have an interesting story. A couple years ago, I came across Wonder Woman Dead Earth, and it was the first time I had ever seen Daniel Warren Johnson's artwork. I really didn't know too much about him, but I knew that the comic community, they were rallying around this artist, but I didn't know why. I read that comic, and instantly I was like, oh my god, this guy's amazing. This art is amazing. So much energy. His artwork was dynamic, and I had to read more. So then I found Do a Powerbomb because that was the one at the time that was being most suggested all over the world. Read Do a Powerbomb. And it's like, hey, I'm not into wrestling anymore. You know, I was when I was a kid, but I'm not into it, wrestling. And they're like, it doesn't matter. Just read the story. You'll love it. So I read Do a Powerbomb, and again, I fell in love with everything that was in that book. How the story told, how absurd it became. But it was amazing. And that joy led me to seek out the rest of his works. So I was on a hunt to have all of his works, read all of his works, experience all of his works. So the next one I was looking for was Beta Ray Bill. Fell in love with that story too. Next one, Extremity. I enjoyed that one as well. And then finally, I got to Space Bullet. Now, Space Bullet is his first graphic novel. And for me, this was a great experience because I had experienced the best of his work already. And when I got to Space Bullet, it was different. Yes, it was still his work. It still had all of the energy of his work, but it was rough. It was unrefined. Reading Space Bullet, it was like seeing the beginning. It was seeing what the artist would become with time. And to be honest, I needed to see that. I needed to break the thought that this guy was always amazing. And the truth is, he grew to be amazing. Which leads to the next point. We don't know how long the artist that is putting out the comic or manga has been drawing. We don't know how many comics or manga they created before the one you're reading now. We don't know when they started drawing, and we also don't know when they started getting serious about drawing. I mean, take yourself for instance, or I'll use myself as an example. I've been drawing for what I would say all my life. Literally, I cannot remember a time when I was not drawing. I was either drawing something from my own imagination or I was copying something that already existed. So let's give myself from the age of 3 on, since I could learn to hold a pencil, I've been moving it and trying to create things. But for a long stretch of time, it was just drawing, just doodling. I wasn't really focused. I had no real goal at the end. I was just getting in some rudimentary practice. Then, fast forward many years later, high school, art school, I really didn't get serious about drawing until I hit art school. And even still, that art school that I went to, it really didn't push me the way I needed to be pushed in a direction that I wanted to go. Instead, that art school pushed me in a direction that, let's just say, our visions were not the same. And it's fine, but that was kind of a setback, or I still see it as a setback. But anyway, that's a story for another video on another day. It really wasn't until I made the decision that I want to be a comic artist, which was in 2022, that I really started focusing my art in the direction of making comics. And I said all that to say is that, what if you only just got serious about making comics? What if you only just got serious about making a manga? What if, you've been drawing for 5-10 years, but really the last year you really dialed in and started focusing on how to improve your art skills? And if that's where you're starting, that's fine. Hey, we all got to start somewhere, but you can't compare yourself to someone who made that decision 10-15 years ago. Trying to compare ourselves to the creator of Berserk or the creator of Witch Hat Atelier or Daniel Warren Johnson. It took time for them to get that good. It took time for them to learn to tell a story in that way. They didn't just start their first, I'm pretty sure if you go back and look at their first comics, their first manga, probably wasn't very impressive. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of manga artists get rejected on their first one-shot submission. It's very few and far between that someone creates their very first manga one-shot and gets it accepted immediately for publishing. I mean, I'm not an expert on the topic, but I'm pretty sure it takes time to get published. Hell, if you think about Bakuman, It's a manga about making manga, which I kind of love those type of stories. But that was their whole goal, was to get better so they could get published. And a lot of their ideas, a lot of their one-shots, they failed. Yeah, some of them were a success in some ways, and some of them were a success in other ways. But I think Bakuman's story is a great example of how you could be excelling at something but failing at another. If you haven't read it, obviously, check it out. But back to the point. We shouldn't compare our day 1 to someone's day 1000. Jake Parker made a video. He made it again this year, and he made it last year as well. But he talked about how he made 1,000 comic pages and everything he learned from that experience. And when he started quantifying that he made 1,000 pages, I was like, man, that's so much. And I wondered to myself, like, how far am I away from 1,000 pages? So I tallied up every comic that I made, and I kind of had to come up with a pathway, because webtoons and those Instagram comics that I made, they weren't necessarily comic page format, so I couldn't necessarily count those the way I wanted to count them. However, I have a rough estimate of I'm around like 80 or 90 pages. So I haven't even hit 100 pages, but yet I'm expecting myself to be perfect on my first couple comics. I haven't hit 100 pages, and I'm comparing myself to artists that have drawn thousands of pages. And I mean, think about, like, Jake Parker is drawing graphic novels and comics. Think about manga artists, especially like long running manga artists. Think about how many pages Ishiro Oda has drawn. Like, I can't even fathom how many manga pages that is, because if his volumes are in the 1000s, think about the pages. And that's just the stuff we see. Like, what about the stuff before that? What about the stuff on the side? Does he even have time for stuff on the side? I don't know. That's a whole different topic. But this is the problem with comparison. There's a timing factor. And I was thinking that even though it's a myth, the 10,000 mastery hour rule, maybe there's still some truth to it. Maybe it's not necessarily the 10,000 hours to become a master, but that dedication towards it, that's really what we need to compare ourselves with. Let's compare the comic pages that we drew today versus the comic pages we drew a year ago or 2 years ago. If you can't take those two things and compare them and see a dramatic difference, then we have no reason to compare ourselves to professionals. The other point I want to bring up about comparison, or the problem with comparison, is that it causes you to lose motivation. It causes you to lose momentum. It causes you to freeze, because once you start comparing your work to a professional's work or just another artist, even if they're not professionally published, once that comparison starts, the fear of not being good enough comes in, the amount of self-doubt comes in, and then you're second-guessing yourself. Next thing you know, you want to go back and redo your first chapter, or you want to go back and redo your first page, or you want to redo all of your character designs because they're no longer cool enough, they're no longer good enough. It stalls you. And instead of moving forward, now you're either stuck in a rut or you've completely halted progress altogether. And then the worst thing that could happen happens. You're not telling your story anymore. You're not drawing anymore. You're just stuck. Stuck in the comparison trap. And that comparison trap can get pretty heavy. It can get pretty dark. And if it's stopping you from moving forward with your comic or your idea, then it's a major problem. But Thankfully, you're watching this video, and I want to help you get out of that mindset. I really want to help everyone move forward with their ideas, despite everything that's going on around us and how comparison can hit us out of nowhere. We're all humans. Are we? We're all humans. We're all gonna do it. But if we can flip the way our mind works and think about comparison in a different way, then this won't be such a pitfall. So changing the direction of how you compare. Instead of looking at another artist's work and comparing it to your own and seeing everything your work is not, start looking at that artist and asking yourself, what can I learn from this artist? Looking at manga, comics, anything you find on the internet that, wow, this is amazing. What can I learn from this? Whenever I see an amazing manga page, I'm thinking, man, I love how they use those speed lines, or how did they lay those screen tones down? Look at the perspective they had on this panel. I look at comics, and is the energy there? How are they placing their bubbles? What's the coloring look like? How can I take this idea of how they used two colors and add it to mine? When I started trying to learn from everything, that really changed my perspective on how I see things. Now, I think about how I can make my comic better because their comic or their manga exist. The second thing I like to do, instead of comparing artwork and tearing down my own, is looking at it for the possibilities, using it as motivation. What do I mean? Every single time I see a self-published artist who is releasing a comic book, releasing a manga, not only do I support it if I'm into their story, it reminds me of what's possible. When I see that a comic artist who started just making comics for fun and eventually they shared it online and now they have a book that they are releasing that people can buy, it reminds me that I can do it too. It reminds me that it's possible to make a comic, have someone like it, and have someone want to buy it. Because that's really what we want, right? We all want to eventually sell our comics and have people like talk about it and have theories about what's happening in the story, and we want that. Think about the possibilities. Think about what's possible. And this is not just the fact that, okay, yeah, they self-published or they got traditionally published. The other thing is that you can see what's possible in comics. Like, think every time you see like a really cool panel or really cool brush technique, like you can think about your own comic and say, oh, I could add that to mine. Instead of getting discouraged by how amazing someone's artwork is, how can you add that to yours? And I guess that kind of ties back in with the you can learn from everything. But it's another way to change your perspective around comparison. Let yourself be inspired to create. Let yourself be inspired to explore. The great thing about comics and manga is that the possibilities are endless. There's things that you can do in comics and manga that you can't do in a video game, you can't do in a movie. There's some wild panel designs out there, some wild panel layouts. And when someone creates those possibilities, like when I read Witch Hat Atelier and saw how she was creating the panels and the page turns and making the borders flow as if the characters could interact with them, it inspired me to say like, oh my god, I didn't know that was possible, but now I do. Now a whole generation of people who read that comic, who read that manga, they know it's possible. So let yourself be inspired. If this episode hit home, we've all been there and we all will go through it. But just those few tips hopefully can help you move forward on your comic and manga making journey. Matter of fact, in the comment section, I want you guys to name an artist that you've compared yourself to and something you can learn from them. I'll go first. Nicholas Draper Ivy. Saw his work on Instagram a long time ago, long before he got started working with DC. And I instantly fell in love with how he draws black characters in a manga anime style. The way he handles clothing and folds and just style. Like, he makes it look so easy. And I know it's not. If I could learn something from him, it would be that. If you guys want to see what kind of projects I'm learning through, the links will be in the description below for my past comics. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, let's make some progress.